He sure did, man. He's like, I feel like his voice on podcasts is like a cup of coffee because he's so goddamn positive. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if I put my headphones on every morning, like before I go to work, and I listen to Brian talk for about like a minute, I'm like, all right, my day's better now. You know?
Yeah. Nice to meet you. I'm Adam. And this podcast is about you, your journey in music, and we'll talk about obviously the re-release of
Sure.
the new record, or not the new record, but the record from '99, I believe, been
Yep.
before the break.
99. Hmm.
Cool, awesome. Well, let's first talk about where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in Worcester, Massachusetts.
What was it like growing up there?
Um, the city has the most mentally ill per capita of any city in the country. And when the
Is it
time I was growing up,
really?
yeah, and the most mentally ill that should be institutionalized that aren't, because during the Carter administration and then into the Reagan administration, they cut funding in most of New England for mental health, and they gave people a bus ticket to Worcester. So the background of my childhood is I just thought every street corner had somebody that never crossed the street. And I thought
Oh,
everybody that talked themselves into, I
yeah.
thought every pizza parlor had somebody in the corner that just twirled their hair and never ordered pizza. So that's Worcester.
Oh, wow. So they sent these people there?
Mm-hmm.
Why Worcester?
It's the second biggest city in New England.
Oh, okay.
And what ended the end result of that is a lot of my friends, basically, when you graduated high school, if you didn't go to college and you stayed in the Worcester area, the easiest job to get as a 18-year-old was to work in a group home, taking care of anywhere from, 5 to 10 clients is what they referred to, people that had mental issues. And a lot of times, a lot of those kids would end up taking those medications that should have gone to those mentally ill people and
Ah, of
selling them.
course.
So, anyways, it was a fun place to grow up.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay. What was it? How did you get into music? Musical
There was
family at
a
all?
No, no, we didn't have a lot of records around my house, like maybe like Billy Joel. My mom really liked Kim Carnes, um, stuff like that. But there was a place when I was young, maybe around, I guess, like seventh, no, eighth grade, called the Worcester Artist Group,
Mhm.
that ran a sort of illegal warehouse space. And so I was introduced to underground music around 88, 89. And it wasn't just music, it was like performance art and sort of out visual art. And it was really neat. I was very, very fortunate to have that as a young person.
That's cool. And what was the first instrument you learned?
Guitar.
Guitar. How old
Yeah,
were you when you started playing guitar?
I was 14. And it
Okay.
was always a vehicle to write songs. I never wanted to be a guitarist. I just wanted to write songs, and that seemed the easiest way. Like I wasn't
So you,
interested in playing an instrument that only had one note. I wanted to, either piano or guitar because I had chords.
sure. And you always wanted to write songs. It wasn't like, oh, I want to learn this song from X, Y, or Z band.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when I would play along to songs, I would listen to like REM or Jane's Addiction. And when in my room and I'd play along, I would play lines that I wouldn't learn what they were playing. I would play things that I thought sounded like they made sense, like another guitar line, that
Oh, like
that
your
would,
own riff within
yeah,
the
like if
song.
I was part of the band, like what would I do? That kind
That's
of thing.
creative. I've never heard anyone say that before. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that was more interesting to me to be like, what notes can I play that work?
Sure. Okay. Were you into like creative writing or
Mhm.
lyric writing at all prior to getting the guitar?
Yeah, I loved creative writing. I loved theater. I'd always done
Okay.
theater. I started in like, I guess, fourth grade. And that aspect, I really love performance, and still to this day, I think that um, music. I went to college for theater,
Oh, I
and
didn't know that. Okay.
yeah, and it was, which was super fun. But the idea of doing something like a film required too many moving parts to me, because you need a really good script and a really good director and a really good cast and ensemble and a really good DP. And like, whereas
Yeah.
music, I could control, I could write it, I could find the person to record it, I could get three other people to gel as opposed to 50.
Sure.
That seemed to make more sense to me.
Were you in just like dramatic theater or was it more musical theater or
Started
all?
off as musical theater. Started off, I
Okay.
mean, it always does, I guess, singing and dancing and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And then when I got to college, all I wanted to do was straight plays. I wanted to do Ibsen, I wanted to do
Okay.
Shakespeare. But yeah, but I have a soft spot for musicals now. I went through a phase where I guess you always like reject things, and I hated them. And now I don't know, musicals are awesome.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny how that is. Like your just taste changes, or as you get older, you kind of appreciate things more than you did
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you were younger.
Yeah, you come
Um,
around and be like, you know what? West Side Story is pretty dope.
yeah, that was actually really well written.
Yeah, it is.
So were you in a band prior to attending college, or was it always mainly doing theater and musical
Not
theater?
really. I had a couple pals, actually Ed McNamara, who he and I started Garrison together.
Hmm.
In high school, he was in a band called Frozen Culture, and I used to just sit in the basement and watch them play countless hours, and I just loved it. And I think that was more inspiring than, people say like, oh, I saw the Beatles or I saw,
Hmm.
the Who or whatever. That seemed out of reach to me. Whereas seeing my friends play music in a basement, I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. And that was the first moment where I thought maybe this could be within my wheelhouse.
Okay. And I mean, the scene in the time, or still, but the scene in Boston and in the Massachusetts area with the bands that were coming out of that at the time was insane. Were you into
Mm.
that like style of music, like Cave In and those type of bands, Converge?
I
Of
never really I liked metal and hardcore um for the energy of the shows,
Okay.
and I liked the musicality of it, of specifically metal. I thought like, wow, they can do that. That's really neat. But I always loved rock more.
Okay.
I loved more swagger. I liked more. I liked the sort of looseness and the swing of good rock. Metal is great, but it's very linear. It's like very.
Hmm.
It kind of sounds like a calculator to me. And then hardcore is awesome, but it's very simple music because it's supposed to be simple music because it's played. It's supposed to be easy to play for like young kids
Hmm.
because it's such a youthful based music. So musically, I was never really pulled into hardcore, but the energy of the shows and the idea that the crowd was part of the show was super exciting. That was really illuminating to me.
Hmm. And you hear that a little bit in the Garrison songs where you have the heavier parts, but obviously the melodies and you can hear what you're saying, everything else, but like that, but like it has that. I don't want to compare you guys to anything, but like it reminds me a little bit of like At the Drive-In, where it's like heavier stuff going on, but then Cedric's kind of singing, but then he kind of yelling, but
That's nice of you to say. I like that band. What's interesting about the At the Drive-In is everybody, nobody else sounds like that band, right? So all these people,
right.
when that band came out, nobody truly sounds like that band because when people, you air drum along to a band, when
Mm-hmm.
people air drum along to At the Drive-In, they air drum along to the vocals because they're so percussive. Like
Oh, that's
like
a
they
good
don't
point.
actually air drum to the drummer. They're air drumming to the like ba 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 ba, like because it's so cool what he's doing over the music. But I thank you. Like that's very nice. I like that band a lot.
That's good. Okay, I didn't want to offend you. You're like,
No,
oh, I
no, not
hate
at
that
all.
band. Why would you ever say
The
that?
worst, man. Come
Everything
on.
sound like that. Okay,
No.
so you didn't really start a band. You didn't. When did you start Garrison then? And was that your first band?
No, no. I had like sort of some stuff in college that, wasn't really fit for consumption outside of my world. And then I played a lot of coffee shops, like acoustic guitar. I played with a while with a cello player for a while.
Wow.
Um, yeah, just I really liked the idea of creating my own music. It wasn't very good, but you got to start somewhere. And then I had this long sort of epic emo metal math band called Stricken for Catherine with some friends. It was very, very ambitious, and we were trying to do, like 13-minute long songs and all these different
Okay.
parts. Not metal, but it had tinges of that. Um, and I think that by the time I started Garrison, which would have been winter of '98, we started writing, Ed and I. I didn't want any more long songs. I wanted to write, condensed, what I considered pop songs, even though they weren't, pop rock songs, but they weren't really poppy.
Hmm. And
But in
did you?
comparison to what I was doing, it was.
Sure. When did you start the singer songwriter? Or what was like really the first band you were in? Was it more of the acoustic singer songwriter
Yeah,
stuff?
college stuff. I mean, probably like 92, 91. I started performing at like coffee shops. There was a place in Westboro, Mass called the Old Vienna Coffee House. I played there. I would play open nights at the WAG. Just sort of getting up there with the guitar when I was, I don't know, 16, 17.
Okay.
But I didn't have a proper band. I mean, like, you know, Stricken for Catherine was a band, so I guess I was 19 um, to about 22. And then Garrison started when I was 23, which I already felt so old for because our contemporaries were bands like Cave In, and they were
Mhm.
probably 18 at the time, you know, and I felt like, oh man, I'm so late in this. They've been playing and putting out records, and I'm the ancient age of 23. How am I going to do
Right.
anything? Right? What am I
Uh,
going to do?
when you went to college for theater, were you pursuing, did you want to do, something with like Broadway or more in that realm or what?
No, I
Oh,
always
really?
wanted to do music. Yeah, and I just love theater because because I had so much experience in it. It was easy. I mean, to be perfectly honest, probably a little bit lazy, as most people are in their college years. And I liked theater, and I was somewhat competent at it because I'd had so much experience in middle school and high school doing it, that it just seemed like, yeah, I can do that. That's fun. And it was really
Mhm.
fun. And I love the collaboration, and I do love theatrics, but I never had any intention of following it after college. It was just something to learn. And then and then I got my degree, which made my parents happy. And then I could start playing music full time.
Okay, so you always wanted to, or it sounds like you always wanted to just be in a band or be
Yeah.
a musician of some capacity.
Yeah. That
Okay.
was always the dream because there's more control because generally speaking, theater is, an interpretive art form. You know, and if you're not writing the plays, you're taking someone's text and taking someone's direction, and you're sort of bringing the text to life, which was fun. But music was creative and interpretive. So not only could I write the material and collaborate with other people, I could perform the material. You
Mhm.
know, so I'm not concerned with performing, a lot of cover songs. I occasionally do, but I'm not, I have to make them my own. Um, but I also wasn't concerned with writing material and having someone else perform it. I always wanted to perform it.
Okay. Well, you guys do a
I
great.
don't feel like I can do that. I don't feel like I can, I feel like I write specifically for my voice, where somebody like Linda Perry can write a song like Beautiful and have Christina Aguilera do it. Um,
Right.
which
But then she can
is
also write
so
her own
respectful.
songs. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Exactly. You know,
okay. I see what you're saying. Which is, yeah, okay. I was gonna ask you, so when did you meet like Ed and the rest of the guys in the band in Garrison and start the band? Like how did that all begin?
Ed was a childhood friend. We knew each other in the third grade. And we bonded over talking about Pink Floyd and The Cure and bands like that. We went to a lot of shows together. He was going to the WAG before I was, so he sort of led the way. He was definitely like a big. He was very inspiring to me, with his breadth of musical knowledge and his openness to stuff. He had an older brother, who Phil, who was like really into Elvis Costello and just was feeding him all this music. He knew so much more about music than I did, probably still does. And so it was really, he was one of the people that sort of took me by the hand and led me into this sort of world of underground music. And then once he and I finally decided to collaborate, we just grabbed whoever was around us. And he knew Guy from a previous band, and we just met Andy through Kurt Ballou, who plays guitar in that band Converge. Uh,
Mhm.
they were pals, and so he knew Andy, and he introduced Andy and I at some show together. And he was like, "Oh, you guys should meet each other. You're both really nice people." I think he said half mockingly, half honestly, you know.
That's funny.
But yeah, so that's how I met Andy, and that's when the band started.
And Kurt recorded the first demo for you guys, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. He recorded it in his basement in Allston, Massachusetts, which was a really fun scene at the time. Like, I was working in a burrito joint with some of the guys from Cave In and some of the guys from Piebald. It's a really
Oh,
small
cool.
scene, and then like
I
Steve
forgot
from
of
Cave In worked at the
Piebald.
bagel
Yeah.
place, and like the drummer from Doc Hopper was our manager, and like Kurt, would send bands that he was recording up to me, and we give him copious amounts of free vegan food, and it was really nice. It was very charming, youthful opportunity that we had in Boston to be young and to get to collaborate with each other, because it was really positive, and we were feeding off of each other. And that was a hoot.
That is, were you able to kind of book shows with each other? I mean, I'm looking at on your Instagram, you have like these old posters from like shows with Cave In, and
Yeah, yeah.
I would imagine that
Well,
was
Ed had actually started something called the Space, which was the extension of the WAG, because the WAG is sort of closed. What didn't completely close down, but it become less about shows and more about what the art that they were doing. And then Ed had sort of taken upon himself to open an all ages space in Worcester called the Space, and that was a a real important hub for the Boston scene. Like there was places in Boston that you would play, and the space, and there were enough kids and enough infrastructure that bands could come through and play both Worcester and Boston, which are only 45 minutes away from each other, and have
Mm-hmm.
huge crowds at both. And so, yeah, there was a lot of those shows with the emo, metal, rock bands, all sort of hardcore bands all thrown together.
That's awesome. When you finished the 3-song demo tape, did you tour it, or like what was like
Mhm.
once the band's together and you got this recording, what do you guys do next?
We were super industrious, so we recorded the demo. We went to dollar a pound and silk screened a bunch of shirts um, on anything like, old soccer shirts and everything. And we booked a 10-day tour down the East Coast playing, people's basements or a record store. Um, and I wrote letters out and I mailed our demo to every record label I could find in like Punk Planet or any zine that I could get my hands on, So
Mm-hmm.
Initial, Revelation, Equal Vision, Art Monk Reconstruction, and just sent it out, to everybody and be like, hey, we're a new band. This demo is recorded by Kurt from Converge, and we're already touring. And sort of the idea is that we have kinetic energy. We are going. So you have it. Get on this train if you want, but this train's going. And we got back from that 2-week tour, and Revelation Records had called and said they were interested in talking to us.
That's
So we were
huge.
really, yeah, things went from 0 to 60 pretty quick. Um, we didn't do the thing like release a record, 7-inch on a local label, and that whole thing. I mean, not we took a big leap forward in having Revelation get behind us, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And what did they do for you when you signed the deal?
Well, they put out the record everywhere internationally, and so to a fairly unknown band, I think if memory serves, the number was we sold 6,000 the first week,
Wow.
and that just blew me away because I couldn't. It's hard for me to conceptualize that somebody that I'd never met was buying my music, like
Right.
because up until that point, like you're playing, shows from anywhere to 10 to 30 people, right? And oh man, maybe played to 80 people. What a big show. And you meet everybody that buys everything because you're also at the merch table, or
Mm-hmm.
you're playing in Boston and Worcester, and you pretty much know everybody in the local scene. So if we're all supporting each other, so that like, well, I bought that band's demo tape or traded demo tape, so I know they have my music, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so once the record came out on Revelation, to realize that maybe there were people in Germany or in the United Kingdom or in California where they were based, that were buying and listening to my music, was a real mind fuck, in a wonderful way. But
Sure. Sure.
cool. Yeah. Still is cool.
I mean, that is. It's
Yeah.
especially now with the internet, it's weird to see like bands will, break or pop off in like some European country and that they're like, I've never even
Mm-hmm.
been there, but somehow they, we're number 5 in whatever,
Yeah.
Norway.
For whatever reason, it
Yeah.
resonates. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and
Somehow it
yeah,
does.
and that's cool, man. That's just, I think, like I mentioned this before on another podcast, like one of the best moments of my touring career was in Nottingham in the UK, and we were at a bar just hanging out with pals called the Old Angel. And we had
Hmm.
played there before, but we weren't playing this particular time. And one of our records was in the jukebox.
Whoa.
And I just like, it was just such a, like, like in a Alfred Hitchcock film, when like the camera zooms in but also pulls back at the same time, like in a Vertigo. And I was just looking at the jukebox being like, whoa, like my music has been the background of something, whatever that
Yeah.
something is. And that's so neat, and humbling and just rad. Yeah, that was the best feeling.
That is cool. That's like probably even cooler that I would like than getting a song on the radio, I would think. Like going into a
Yeah.
random bar that like obviously had played,
Hmm.
and then looking at the jukebox and seeing your record in there, like, whoa, like this is
Yeah.
cool. People are, will pay a quarter or whatever to pick my song out
Hmm.
of this catalog to play. That is really rad.
Yeah, it was great. That was a great
That's
feeling.
super cool. When did you start recording the Bend Before the Break?
uh I want to say well, we did demos in the spring of '98, but I think we finished the proper recording for it in winter into early spring of 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Brian McTurnan was a real good friend of Ed McNamara's, and he had already been working with Revelation. He had recorded some stuff for Texas is the Reason. He
Mm-hmm.
was in a hardcore band from DC called Battery.
Battery. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he was just part of the scene and a really good um, record producer. And so he was a great guy to work with as well. So having worked with Kurt and then worked with Brian, really fortunate to work with people that were exciting, creative, and damn good at what they did.
Yeah, he's
Um,
cool. I interviewed him actually for his new band, Be Well.
Be well. They're great, aren't
Yeah.
they? Yeah,
Yeah, and just the his catalog of bands and records that he's produced is like so beyond impressive. It's like,
yeah,
whoa, wait, what? You did The Illusion of Safety by Thrice, and like just
yeah.
bands like Movie Life, just like all these, like that whole, he covered like all of that emo scene for 10, 15 years.
He sure did, man. He's like, I feel like his voice on podcasts is like a cup of coffee because he's so goddamn positive. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if I put my headphones on every morning, like before I go to work, and I listen to Brian talk for about like a minute, I'm like, all right, my day's better now. You know,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter like anywhere in the podcast. I can just listen to him talk because he's so enthusiastic and he's so into what he's doing. That's great.
Yeah, he's super cool. So yeah, I had him on and we talked to me about Battery, and then obviously he's producing, but his new band Be Well, who are
Mhm.
really, really cool. And they're doing big things too, which is
They
awesome.
are. They are.
Super cool. So he recorded the record.
Yep.
And now we're years later and you guys re-released the album.
Records coming out. Iodine, again, old pal Casey, who we'd worked with a little bit in Boston, got in touch with Jordan over at Revelation and said, hey, I want to do this. I want to do it, release it on vinyl properly, because it was a 7-inch, but it was an EP that had, there were 2 more songs on the CD, so it never had been properly on vinyl. And we got it remastered and did new artwork with a really cool guy named Dan McCarthy, beautiful illustrator, and put the record out. And it's great. And it's, he posted it, and I don't know how many hundreds of copies it sold very quickly, but it's just nice. Like that people, never in my dreams would I have made a record 19 years ago, or God, it's more than that, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
20, 20, almost 22 years ago, and thought that people would care.
Right.
Now, like, and they do. And I, some of it's nostalgia. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Reliving some memories. And then there's a lot of younger people that are buying it. Wow. That's great. That's really cool.
Well, I feel like pop punk and, well, you guys aren't really pop punk at all, but I mean, like the
Now
emo
you're
scene.
insulting me, calling me
No,
pop
I
punk, dude.
didn't mean to call you pop punk, but that, like the scene of the emo scene is kind of making this, obviously this, comeback, so to speak, with like
Yeah.
emo nights and all these other things that are going on. Do you feel like that has, like, I bet a lot of people are going and finding Garrison now, right? Like that have been like, that are following these other bands and going, okay, who did they, get their inspiration from, and pull back and pull back and pull back. I'm sure you're getting new fans of the record,
Mm-hmm.
which must be pretty cool to see.
It's great. I mean, I don't, yeah, I mean, I think there's enough lines that connect that web, um, that people can go back and do the research, be it online or analog, and find, oh, like you guys played with that band, and
Mm-hmm.
we're thanked on these liner notes, and you thanked that band, and then like maybe I should check this out. There was a lot of great music. I mean, there's a lot of great music that came out that got popular. My Chemical Romance,
Mm-hmm.
Thursday, At the Drive-In, that broke out. But then there was also a lot of great music that didn't break out. And it's nice that there's a subset of youth culture that is interested, to
Mm-hmm.
go back and find that stuff. I mean, some of my favorite bands were never big. I was a huge fan of a band called Bitch Magnet, from Louisville, Kentucky. Um, I don't think they were ever much of anything, as far as like popularity was concerned. But man, they shaped my musical world for sure. And I think that's great. I think that to be able to do that is pretty fascinating.
So how did this whole like reissue come about? Like, were you expecting it, or was it something you had thought about for a while, or was it just kind of?
No, because we had done the model with Casey, and Casey had taken a couple, almost 2 decades off really of music, and he got back into it, and he got in touch with me, which again is one of the wonderful things about putting out records, is you get in touch with old friends. And so we got back in touch, and he was like, "Hey, I'm starting the label up again." And he originally wanted to just re-release the model, but we had done that not too long ago on a German label called Arctic Rodeo. Um, and he got this idea, like, why don't I just ask Jordan? Because Jordan has no intention of pressing that on vinyl anymore. He's he's quite happy to press Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits and those records that huge records that he had. 500 copies, 600 copies of a Garrison record is, it's not really worth his time. So for Iodine it is, and for Iodine it's fun, and they can give it the love and the attention that the record deserves. And it came about pretty quickly. I think thankfully Casey's so industrious that he can make things happen quickly and efficiently.
I know you have a bunch of projects going on, but where were you at when COVID happened?
I was living in Brooklyn. I own a boutique wine shop in Williamsburg. So I'm imagining I must have been exposed to it. I think I was probably one of those asymptomatic people because I was working there in February 2020 without a mask. But I had the opportunity to move I have 6-year-old twins, and
Oh,
moved
wow.
my family upstate, and which has been great. And so I still go back to the city quite often. But I was, in the midst of that. So COVID, and parenting, I took a break from music for about 5 years. And coming back, I have a really new perspective. So I've got 2 new bands. I have Judas Knife, which is sort of like gothy, rhythmic, sort of groovy stuff. And then I have a band called Her Head's on Fire, which would be more in the vein of people who I think were fans of Garrison would because Her Head's on Fire is guitar rock.
Okay.
But yeah, coming back, I've mentioned this before too. Like I fell into the trap of being a jaded, bitter musician who was upset that he wasn't more successful and more famous. I thought it was such a boring thing to talk about. And and I came full circle, and I was just like, no, music's great, and my friends are so talented, and they write wonderful stuff, and I'm so happy to be still creating music and part of a scene. Granted, we're more an internet-based scene, as we're all
Right.
spread out all over the globe, but we all get together at shows. So when somebody comes through town, you go see them. But yeah, it's almost like a rebirth, and not just the reissues, but music in general for me has been so goddamn fulfilling and exciting in the last 2 years.
Did you start those projects prior to COVID?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were going already. It just COVID sidetracked them, or allowed us to sort of get perspective on what we're doing as far as the recording went. And I got to work with Kurt again. So Judas and I, we recorded with Kurt.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, so I mean, it's just, again, getting in touch with old friends. It's really fun.
That is awesome. I love I don't know who wrote your Wikipedia page for Garrison, but you put that.
I've never read it. Hopefully somebody that's literate.
Oh, well, somebody with some humor wrote it, because they every time they refer to Kurt, they say that he's pleasant smelling. So I'm not sure
God.
where that came from.
Oh, I wonder if Andy added that. That seems like something Andy would say. I'll have to find out.
It's pretty hilarious. Like so it says additional connections made between Andy Joe by the lovely smelling Kurt Balu. And then he comes up later and it says blah blah blah, US working on their first full length, A Mile in Cold Water, with the consistently pleasant smelling Kurt.
Wow, news to me.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we've fostered a sense of comedy.
I was laughing. I'm like, that is so funny. I wonder who wrote this.
That's great.
So okay, so he's worked on the new projects that you've
yeah, he worked on, he recorded Judas Knife has a record called Death is the Thing with Feathers. And he recorded that. It was so much fun to get back in the studio, 20 years later, and collaborate again, and you spend half the time catching up and like, oh,
right.
What's your kid doing, man? Yeah, here's what my kids are doing, and like that stuff. You talk about that, and you talk about, home owning, really these
adulting.
things. Yeah. And then you also get to the brass tacks and get to make music with somebody that's at the top of their game. that's really awe-inspiringly fun.
Mm-hmm. Do you have plans to tour with the bands at all?
Yep. Yeah, of
Oh, you do?
course.
Okay.
Yeah. I love performing. I'm not a big fan of just making records and putting them out. I think they need to live. And I like it when they live on vinyl, because I just love the physical
Of
um
course, yeah.
of it. And then I think that you need to interpret it in the same way that I wouldn't write a play and just let it be a book. I'd want to perform it. It needs to be heard, and it needs to be heard live and in the moment. And so, yeah, I'm quite looking forward to performing more. I performed one show with each of my new bands, but we're definitely going to be going out on the road
That's
once things
awesome.
get a little bit more normal.
Sure. Yeah, because I mean, as you know, kids come involved and families and everything, I know it becomes difficult to be like, all right, I'm leaving for 3 weeks or whatever to tour. So I think that's really cool and inspiring that you want to continue doing that with the new bands.
Well, you just have to be smart about it. You got to be like, it's got to be the right 3 weeks. You can't just
Right,
be like,
right,
let's
right. Of
go tour
course.
the Midwest for 3 weeks and play to nobody. Um, it has to be, no offense to the Midwest, but you have to be, there's the adage, work smarter, not harder. So
Yeah.
you got to be, make sure that the shows that you do are going to be, something that is worth everyone's time.
All right, a little more strategic than just
Yeah.
getting in the van and
Yeah.
driving to the middle of the country or whatever.
Playing basements and record stores.
Yeah, there you go. When did the idea of was this whole like remix and the re-releasing of this record, was that all something that came forward during COVID? Was it like, oh hey, everyone's got nothing going on, like, and then this became an idea, or did you already have plans to re-release the
No,
EP?
it did come through. I don't associate it with the pandemic, but yeah, it did. The sort of discussion about it, I want to say, started maybe 2 years ago, as gears sometimes move slowly in the beginning of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think probably we discussed it at least as like an idea, but then you get the ball rolling when you have a little bit more time on your hands and you're sitting indoors, not going to the theater.
Sure.
And not going out to eat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when was it just remastered, or did Brian get in there and reproduce anything, or
No, he
like
didn't
tell
need
me?
to.
Okay.
No, it was just remastered. I think his mixes sound great. I think he was pretty focused and knew what he was doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he knocked it out of the ballpark. So it's remastered, so it sounds like broader,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same idea.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
And you said new artwork for it, and how did you collaborate with Dan?
Dan is somebody that Casey knew, and I think he was a fan of the band, and he was just like, yeah, please use my artwork. And he's got such a great, I mean, you go to his website and his prints and his portfolio and all the things he's done. It's really, what a talented guy. And so it was really nice to be able to collaborate with him as well, and get him on board. And we just took something that was existing. We took something that was a piece of his. He didn't actually put together the record for us. We just took a piece of his art and then incorporated it into the liner notes and everything.
Oh, cool. Okay, so
Yeah.
you didn't draw it specifically for
No.
the record.
No.
Got it. Very cool. And what about doing anything with Garrison? Any plans to get back
Yeah,
together and play some
we'll do
shows?
something. Yeah, we'll do something. I mean, I think there's this came out. I mean, there's talk about doing Mile and Cold Water as
Oh,
well,
wow.
re-release. And that's in process. But yeah, we'll play some shows. I mean, I think it's just whenever. It's a little bit. It's really on those guys. They're all in Boston still, and I'm in New York, so they have the lion's share of the work to do. So
Mhm.
they have to basically do the wood shedding and get back up to speed, and then I would sort of come in and step in to the work that they already would have been doing. But yeah, I mean, we have spoken about it, and I think it's like, if as long as it's fun, we'll do it. And I think there's no reason it shouldn't be fun.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And thank you so much for doing this. I
Oh,
really,
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate it, Joseph. I have one more question for you. I want to know
Yeah.
if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
All the cliches are true. um, yeah, I mean, the cliche about doing what makes you happy. It's true. You can't second guess things. I don't think you have too much control about your level of success. You can create make your band what you would want to see. Make something that would blow you away first. And if and that should resonate. And even if it doesn't resonate with millions of people, who cares? That's not the point. That's not why you're in it. And if you are in it for that, you know, talk to Britney Spears. I mean, that's do something else. Yeah, I mean, all the cliches are true. Like the being on the road is super exciting and super fun when you're young and in your 20s, and it's super hard and super brutal when you're in your 40s. The wear earplugs. Wear earplugs. Maybe that would be my. Let's condense it into that. Wear earplugs. Bring it back.